Good afternoon to listeners and viewers in India, and my greetings to my illustrious set of panelists who are joining from different time zones. I'm Mohan Kumar. I'm Dean of the Office of International Affairs at the Jindal Global University. Absolutely honored and delighted to moderate this panel with a very fine set of scholars and professors. I just wanted to begin by saying that internationalization at home, at least for the purposes of this panel, will be defined as any internationally related activity in a university, with the exception of outbound student and staff mobility. So that is the broad definition that I would like to put forward for this discussion. I just want to begin by describing the challenge. And the challenge is really that if you look at the UNESCO statistics, the latest statistics of the number of students who are in higher educational institutions the world over, it's about 235 million. And guess what? There are just a mere 6.5 million students out of those who actually avail of the opportunity to go outside of their university and study, which math has never been my strong point, but I think it's about 2.5 to 3%. And in the office at Jindal Global University, I'm proud to say we are hitting 5%, although my Vice Chancellor has read the Riot Act to me and said we should hit 10%. So my job is on the line here. But really, I just wanted to tell all of you and the listeners that this is very, very challenging. We are actually, in talking about internationalization in the classic sense, ignoring the 97% of the students or so who don't have the means to travel outside of their universities. So it is, I think, a pivotal panel as far as I'm concerned, because if you mean well for the students and their welfare, we should all be doing much more about internationalization at home. So what can we possibly accomplish with internationalization at home? I believe it is really about getting or imparting in students intercultural competence. I'm using a very broad definition. The idea is to expose the students to different cultures other than their own, to views other than their own. Therefore, it just doesn't stop with culture. You have to really be exposed to views on fundamental issues that are not your own. And therefore, you develop an open-mindedness about both cultures and views. So this is what internationalization aims to accomplish. And the challenge before us, I believe, is to make sure this happens for the 96, 97% of the students who simply don't have the means to really go outside and do what is known as a study abroad. So I would begin by talking about 3 or 4 things and then hand illustrious panelists. One, I think we need to have a curriculum which reflects this intercultural theme, if you like, or internationalization of the curriculum. You cannot have internationalization at home with a curriculum which reflects 19th or 20th century syllabi. So that's the first challenge I think we have. Somehow we need to include in curricula the idea that there can be different points to an issue, that there are cultural differences which are at play, and therefore that is extremely important, I think. The second is, I think we need to somehow have a systematic, holistic approach to internationalization at home, rather than a bits and pieces approach, if you like. So that's the second point I'd like to make. The third point, I think COVID was a bit of a wake-up call for all of us, but it did help us with the use of technology. And I remember we tried virtual classrooms with some of our strategic partners of Jindal Global University. I believe those can be useful for this 96, 97%. I still think we could continue even post-COVID with some of those virtual classrooms where students have an opportunity, if only virtually, to try and mix with other students, hear their views, and have faculty diversity, if you like. The number of foreign students who come to your campuses, I think that is an enormous privilege, frankly, because your domestic students then get an opportunity to interact with those international students. I dare say countries in the West, particularly the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, they are very fortunate because you have a big bunch of foreign students who are concentrated. I forgot France, which I shouldn't, since I was ambassador there. So Professor Fady, I'm remembering Paris as well. I did my PhD from Sciences Po, and I know Sciences Po has a bunch of foreign students as well. So France certainly, but you guys are lucky. When I say you guys are lucky, I have in mind India, where I'll be honest, I'll be brutally honest, it takes a lot to get foreign students here for considerable periods of time. It's difficult. Having said that, the Jindal Global University has always been an exception. We've managed to get hundreds of students for short-term India immersion courses, which we normally get in December, January, and June and July, when our normal students aren't there. So the rooms are available. We've got a bunch of people from Australia, a bunch of people from the UK, and we make sure that at least some Indian students interact with them during that holiday period, so that is another way in which you can actually promote internationalization at home. I want to conclude by saying that in the context of G20, it just occurred to me as I was preparing for this panel, perhaps we should think of a G20 fellowship, a G20 scholarship, a G20 mobility exchange, something along the lines of what universities can do in the context of G20, because the G20 priorities are well known. I mean, India's priorities, of course, are unique, but I think the general G20 priorities in terms of climate change, in terms of inclusive economic growth, in terms of gender, these are common. It's not just India's priority. I would say it is G20 priority, including digital commerce. So I think we should try and see down the road if we cannot have a G20 specific Erasmus Plus kind of thing, which can promote internationalization both abroad and at home. So with those few words, I want to call on Professor Dr. Fady Fadel. If you can go first, and if all of you can just confine yourself to 5 minutes or thereabouts, we will have enough time for taking questions from the audience. So once again, thank you very much for joining me from various time zones. And Professor Fady, you have the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Professor Mohan. I really appreciate this initiative to gather all these people coming from different international backgrounds to share our thoughts. So I am the Chancellor of the American Business School of Paris, and through this mission, I'm here to share these thoughts with you about the internationalization of the university at home. At the American Business School of Paris, not only we are lucky, but we are graced because we are welcoming 800 students coming from 70 different nationalities. 82% of our students are not French. They are internationals. I don't like the word foreigners. I do prefer the word international because they are bringing with them all their national mindset, their cultural mindset, their background, and they come here to share all the thoughts with their teammates, with the community, and our alumni network is spread all around the world. So when we say that it's about the international environment and intercultural atmosphere that we are offering to our students, it's not just a word, it's a reality. This reality makes our students very open-minded. Those who are coming from India, who are coming from the US, from Australia, from Europe, from the Middle East, from Africa, from Asia, all around the world, they are coming in order to meet other students coming from other cultures and to earn not only degrees or knowledge, but especially what you said, Professor Mohan, intercultural mindset, intercultural competence and skill. Because nowadays, when we pretend to be a business school and we are offering majors such as management, international management, international business, international marketing, international finance, and we are not, I would say, integrating the international component inside the community and in the programs. So it doesn't make sense. So when it comes together, all these people together, not only I would say it's a big luck, but it's a grace. Now there is another tough task of the faculty is to make all these people interact positively, because it's not an easy task, you know, to consider all these cultures and to make all these people work together. When they will graduate, when they will go to work all around the world, they are going to work all together from Mexico, from the US, from Russia, from India. But they will have the maturity. But in school, this maturity is, I would say, morning, and it's now getting more, I would say, conscious. That's why the role of our faculty, of our community here, is to accompany the students to earn this maturity, to work with other teammates coming from different backgrounds. Another, I would say, challenge that we have, that, you know, we have lots of study abroad and exchange programs with other sister universities all around the world. So when I tell the students, go guys, now you have to study abroad, now you have to take benefit of these agreements and to go to earn this international exposure, they tell me that, Chancellor, we are already abroad. We are already international environment. So why me, Indian, you want me to go, let's say, to Germany or to go to Denmark or to the US? Here I am meeting people and students coming from Denmark, from Germany, from the US, etc. So offering this international environment is definitely something very interesting, and it gives us more responsibility to be more and more aligned to the international standards, because having accreditations coming from Europe and from the US is definitely a big asset to ensure the students who are coming from all around the world that they are going to earn, besides this intercultural competence and skills, something very valuable, which will allow them to work worldwide. Because if they coming to France to earn this knowledge and this degree, it's because they are aiming to have international career. And this is our duty. Beside this, what we are offering in terms of atmosphere is to offer them valuable accreditations, which will make their career being well recognized worldwide. Is it okay?
Sorry, no, please go ahead. You have 1 minute more.
So this 1 minute more is, I'm really eager to increase the cooperation with JJU, and having more and more students from JJU coming all around, you know, France, and take benefit of this of these programs at the American School of Paris, and sending our students, not the Indians one, but the others one, to JJU to take benefit of what you are offering, guys, in terms of this international environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for interrupting you. You are lucky, because your institution, to me, on the face of it, appears an outlier when you say 80% of the students from all parts of the world. The only point I would make is, if a student from the UK goes and spends time in Sweden or Finland or France, as opposed to spending time in India, China, I would say the quality of intercultural competence, which we are talking about, would also be vastly superior if they made the trip to India, China, rather than, with due respect, because going in the West gives you, of course, there are differences between UK and France, no question, but I think the differences are so much more when the student takes the trouble, as you say, to come to JGU, and I'm more than happy to welcome as many students as you want, Professor Fady. So thank you very much. I now turn to Dr. Cheryl Matherly. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you. Well, I'm delighted to join this panel and be part of this discussion. So I'm Cheryl Matherly. I'm the Vice President and Vice Provost for International Affairs at Lehigh University, which is located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, in the United States. And by context, I won't say much about my institution, but I will note that we are a medium-sized private university in the Northeast of the United States. And I add that because that does have some relevance sort of for the perspective that I bring to the topic. I'd like to provide some perspective from the United States about how this issue looks from both my own institution perspective, but from the US higher education system. And I appreciate, Professor Kumar, what you said at the beginning about the number of students who are mobile outside of their home country. So of course, the United States receives the largest number of students coming to study outside their home country. We have roughly 1 million international students that study in the United States. At my university, we have roughly 1,200 international students. But at the same time, the number of U.S. students who go and participate in mobility programs themselves remains very small. That number is roughly 1 to 2% of U.S. college students participate in some kind of mobility scheme. And so much of the discussion in the United States sort of centers from that perspective, that if we assume that global learning happens only through mobility, then a significant number of our students don't get that experience. They don't do that. And at the same time, while our international students and our international scholars, 1 in 3 of our faculty at Lehigh have an international degree, that becomes a very rich resource for the university, but without a kind of intentionality, that is an untapped resource, and you end up having large pools of domestic students sitting alongside your international students without really benefit of that kind of learning. And I think from the US perspective, several of the issues that are shaping the way we think about this discussion about internationalization at home had roots in issues that were certainly predated the pandemic, but have been accelerated by issues that we've been dealing with in the last several years of that. And so one of those clearly is the expansion of virtual learning. And so for many institutions, I think the common thing we know around the world is just the fact that through the pandemic to realize what we could or couldn't do through virtual learning completely changed the landscape, I think, in some really important ways. And for example, at my institution, probably the most significant shift was not just the creation, but also I might even add the acceptance of virtual internships, which suddenly created new opportunities for students to engage with learning by remaining there on campus. I think the second issue that has become extremely important in US higher education is this issue of access. In other words, who gets access to these programs by virtue of their degree, by virtue of their socioeconomic status, by virtue of their own background and comfort level with engaging with international travel. And so as we look at, again, the diversity of students who come to US higher education, a major theme to look at then is ensuring that if we say that global learning is an important part of the US higher education experience, then how do we ensure that that's something that's available to all students, not just a small group of privileged students who have the ability or the money to be able to travel or that experience. And that's certainly true in my institution. As you look at the diversity of the US higher education system, and you look at other systems, such as, say, the 2-year community college system, is a major topic because those are students who very often don't participate for a lot of reasons. I think a third issue, again, one that was certainly present prior to the pandemic, is this issue of climate and sustainability of travel. A lot of US travel abroad tends to be short programs. And again, prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about about the climate impact, carbon footprint of the number of students participating in those short programs. And I don't think at this point as the discussion sort of shapes itself out, not that we're going to pull back and say we don't think that mobility is important, but rather to say, is it the only way to do this? And are there other ways that create avenues for those kind of experiences to happen? I think then the final piece that's driving the discussion from the US side is in some ways a kind of just more existential question of what's the purpose of going to university? What is it that we expect students to get, especially given the price tag for most of the institutions? And I think this is a question that gets that embedded in one of certainly around global learning, but really the kind of readiness to tackle and engage with big global questions and to deal with difference. And a lot of times our discussions here become grounded in these become experiences that help students learn to deal with very complex issues and dealing with this with people who understand or define problems differently than them. And that becoming the kind of skill that we expect someone to leave university with. That then is reflected in the kinds of ways that we approach internationalization at home, which certainly is through virtual or virtual learning, so COIL classes, virtual exchanges I mentioned, trying to do more with engaging with the diversity on our own campuses. I'm certainly going to talk a little bit more about that in later discussion. But also I would add, the third is then with diversity within our own communities. I think another of the resources for many U.S. institutions is that we're all located in incredibly rich, diverse communities themselves. You know, my community where Lehigh is located we're located in a neighborhood that has a large number of immigrants from the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, from other parts of Central America. The Lehigh Valley, where we are, the larger area we're located, has one of the largest Syrian immigrant communities in the United States, along with a large Kenyan diaspora. So these become, we have a large Ukrainian community here. And so how do we also look at this in terms of how students see these kind of global local issues and engage here with you look at this within our own communities as part of the kind of learning with that. So those are a few just contexting thoughts about how this looks from the perspective of the United States and some of the issues that are driving the way that we're thinking about it generally and in particular here at Lehigh.
Thank you so much. And I recognize now that each university, each higher education institution is really, its narrative is going to be dependent on where you're located, as you rightly said, the kind of ecosystem you have, the immigrant communities you have. Would you say, Dr. Matherly, that your institution, Lehigh, has gone back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of student enrollment and foreign students coming and studying there?
We have, and I'd say that, so one of the things that we've seen, and I think this is fairly true across a lot of the U.S. institutions, is that our numbers, our enrollments and our patterns look very much like pre-pandemic levels. And so our numbers of, especially our international student enrollments and such. But I think that, and especially I think important for this discussion, is that I think what has shifted is an understanding of what's possible in terms of how we engage more broadly of that. And certain things that I'm seeing that we do now were things that simply would not have been possible, because I think some of not because we couldn't have done it, but because there was I would say, a skepticism of the value of that. And so and again, I'll allude to it and save it later for more discussion with others. But what we're doing now, say with COIL, would not have happened pre-pandemic, because I'm not sure that our faculty or our students would have really accepted it in the way now that there is this understanding of what can happen, even in a format just like what we're participating in here, you know, that this is more accepted on that. And I think there's parts where we have rolled back to pre-pandemic, and I won't lie, we have also more students who are back interested in travel programs, but we're also seeing sort of more interest and more acceptance of this kind of expanded type of opportunities, of where I think internationalization at home are not seen as an extra, but is seen as something much more accepted and normal as we come into a post-pandemic period.
Thank you very much. And indeed, you're right. This is the third edition of the World University Summit that the Jindal Global University is organizing. Obviously, it was born out of the pandemic and so on, but we now find it so useful to use this instrument of technology to get so many of you, which would be otherwise, frankly, impossible. We are looking at hundreds and hundreds of scholars who are participating in this 5-day World University Summit. So you're quite right. I turn to Professor Dr. Angelia Wilson, University of Mancheste. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much. And thank you to JGU for holding this event. I want to pick up on some of the themes that we've already been discussing. Most of all, I want to focus on the different routes into internationalization. I'm the Associate Dean for Internationalization at the University of Manchester. Manchester University has about 45,000 students, and about 60% of those international students, and about 50% of our staff are international staff. So on the one hand, we have a route of internationalization that has been very traditional, of students going and coming, toing and froing back and forth in terms of exchanges. But on the other hand, I want to note two other ways in which internationalization plays a part in our understanding of education. I think it's important to note that many of those in the West, but I would argue the UK in particular, has had a huge role in defining what education is. And that aspect of our colonialism has to be acknowledged. And one of the ways in which internationalization is now being integrated into our curriculum is to think about decolonizing the curriculum and listening to authentic voices from other places. Secondly, I want to note one of the programs that we have working on, that we're doing here at the University of Manchester, which is about trying to bring other expertise into the classroom. So this is another route into making sure that our students get an international experience, and that is bringing almost takes the decolonization of the curriculum to another step, which is to bring those international scholars into our classrooms. So our Global Classrooms Initiative works on different kinds of level, a kind of low, medium, and high touch level. At a low level, that could be simply me using a recorded lecture that I use in my classroom and sharing that with a colleague elsewhere around the world, and somewhere around one of our partners who also has expertise in that area, sharing their lecture with me, and our students get to listen to those. Another kind of low level activity may be holding student discussion boards together, so that if students who are working on particular issues or particular projects can be engaged in having conversations virtually. Of course, there are other levels of that integration, which could be and are joint MA and postgraduate taught courses and joint postgraduate research courses. So there is something at every level, and I'm going to come back to the reasons for that in just a moment. But there are ways in which both students and staff can engage in the global classroom at every level. I do think it's important that we don't let go of the good things that unfortunately COVID has given us, but that is, as my colleague mentioned, the huge leaps and bounds in IT that have made global classrooms possible. But I would say, more importantly, the cultural shift. Academics can be a bit slow to take on new things, and the fact that COVID has taught us all to use Zoom and to step out of our comfort zones, and has made large institutions realize the importance of IT systems and the possibility of being flexible around those IT systems has been a huge important factor in moving us all toward virtual education, virtual learning, and the global classrooms. We talked a little bit about why this is important. Yes, of course, student exchanges where students leave and go to another university will continue to be important, but there are so many students, not just because socioeconomic reasons, who can't go and participate in other countries. I don't know about other institutions, but many institutions here in the UK, especially as an outcome of COVID, have noticed the rise in mental health problems amongst students and issues of isolation. And for those students who, for whatever reason, maybe carrying responsibilities, aren't able to go and make that trip abroad, this gives them a way in which to access international expertise and become international scholars without necessarily taking some of the risk or concerns that they may have. I just want to mention 2 or 3 other things before I stop. One of those is the cost of the global classroom. And yes, there is some sort of IT cost, but I think that's been a gift from the last few years, is that those costs have been borne by the university itself. The second cost is around professional services, because all of these kinds of endeavors bear a cost to our professional services and our IT staff, as well as those other staff that are making these things possible. And on that note, I want to thank JGU's administrative staff for running such a smooth event, because we all know the kinds of things that go on behind the scenes at an institution. There is a cost there, and there's a cost to the institution to make sure that those professional services are appropriately rewarded and given the support that they need. In terms of benefits of the global classroom, those ones that we've already mentioned, but I think importantly for my own classroom, where I've brought in expertise from around the world, the student comments, and this is the thing that I think, we can think what we're doing is great, but I like to hear from the students about why they think it's great. And what they like is the authentic voice. So I can tell them something that, a person in India might think this, or a person in America might think this, or a person in Australia might think that. But when they hear it from an expert in the global classroom, somehow they believe it a lot more than if I'm just telling them myself in a lecture. So I think getting those authentic voices into the classroom and sustainability have been the two benefits that we've seen, two most important. I'll talk about leveraging external stakeholders in a moment, maybe in questions, but there's two other things that I want to mention. One has been about, one is about lessons and that we've learned in this process. The first is about the importance of memos of understanding, relationships between institutions that actually mean something. My approach to this role has been about building relationships. I don't want pieces of paper. I want long-term relationships. I don't want Facebook friends. I want actual friends. I want people that we meet, that we have continual conversation with. And that may be across the university, or it may be with a few departments or a few disciplines. In every institution, we have first responders, first adopters. We have case studies. Some of these initiatives have to have a kind of soft launch in order to get people on board. But that nevertheless, those partnerships and relationships need to be emotionally intelligent, and they need to be integrated, not just pieces of paper. And the last thing that I want to note is about why universities do this. We've mentioned all sorts of reasons, and one of the reasons may be rankings, that institutions think that, oh, well, this in some way will bring us up the rankings. This in some way will help our reputation. And undoubtedly it will. We work for a business in many ways, and they want to do better and be better and their reputation to increase. But I can honestly say the argument that has won the most support and won the most advocates over to the global classroom for the University of Manchester has been to talk about student experience and the importance of and encouraging colleagues to think about the students first and their experience and their need to become international scholars. I'm going to leave that there and look forward to questions.
Thank you very much. You're quite right. I think institutions, the relevance, the reputation, all of it is so important. We call ourselves the Jindal Global University, so we like to believe the globalization, internationalization, whatever you want to call it, is very much part of our DNA. But it also means that students join the university, at least this university, with a certain level of expectations, and that has to be met. And that is one of the challenges, frankly. We have a big university now, not very big by Indian standards or even global standards, but 10,000 odd residential students. And to meet their expectations is really a challenge. Thank you very much. I now turn to Ms. Liliya, Head of International Relations Department of the Financial University of the Russian Federation. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much. First of all, I also would like to say that I'm very honored to participate in this World University Summit. And thank you. I thank Jindal Global University for this opportunity. I thank my colleagues, Professor Fady, Professor Matherly, and Professor Wilson for sharing their thoughts. On the other hand, to be honest, it's very difficult now to add something absolutely new, but I will try to share the experience of our university. The Financial University in Moscow is a university with 100 years of history, And 80 years from this history, we are open for international students. So I do believe that we have some experience how to organize the comfortable, effective learning for international students and create the internationalization at home strategy. I have to say that internationalization always was, now is, and will be the important focus of our university. We live in very changing world, in very unpredictable world. And what we see in our university, that giving the international competence for our students becomes crucially important, because it's very important for our students to become a specialist, that they can make their own decisions, that they will better understand the people from different cultures, from different countries. I think we all understand how it's very important right now. Currently, we have more than 2,000 international students from more than 90 countries, and we need to manage this diversity. And we try to make it from the first day when these international students come in our university. So we put a lot of attention to their adaptation. So to making international teams, international bodies that supports international students when they become students of financial university. Starting from the dormitories, we really motivate our students to not to live with the students with the same culture, with the same country, because it's very important for them to meet more people, to make more friends, like Professor Wilson already said. It's very important to have students from everywhere. And, you know, it's not easy. Sometimes students don't agree. They say, no, we are coming, for example, from Vietnam, and we want to live with our friends from Vietnam. It's more comfortable, it's nice, it's pleasant. And but we have a lot of activities to help them to adapt to students from different cultures and to feel themselves comfortable. Of course, the international curriculum is very important, and we have now a lot of courses with a special focus on, for example, economics or finance or what different field of study of Europe, Asia, Latin America, and students can choose the specific focus, the specific subjects that match their interest. And what we see right now, that the students are really motivated to explore the world. They really would like to know more about different regions, different countries. They want to study different languages. I remember myself being a head of international department like 10 years ago, and everybody, I mean, Russian students were wanted to study only English. Yeah, now it's kind of compulsory competence. Everybody already have, they study English starting from schools, but now they would like to study Korean language, Chinese, Vietnam, some very rare African languages even. And what we do, we create special institute that helps students to find possibilities to explore different cultures, study languages, and make their own opinion about cultures and international diversity. I completely agree that 2 years of lockdown caused by COVID brought new perspective in our internationalization strategy. We moved many of our activities online. And in the beginning, it was really struggling how we can organize international activities online, because it was rather difficult to help students to feel, to communicate in different languages, to meet each other, to become virtual friends, but we have to. I also would prefer to have like personal communications. I would like face-to-face study more than online, but that's for me. But what we've seen, that the students, they are more adapted to technologies than us. That's completely true. They feel themselves very comfortable. They don't see this how to say, screen barrier. And we organized many projects in the format of COIL, Collaborative Online Interactive Learning, with students from different countries. And you see, they're like fishes in the ocean. They feel themselves very comfortable with new technologies. And now when the borders are open and when we don't have the limitations of the lockdown period, we see that some students prefer to stay, to continue their online experience in the international perspective. And that, of course, forces us to organize such projects, some new initiative for the students. So now we organize many activities, both online and offline for our students. What else I would like to say? That one more time, it's very important for us that our students and international students, Russian students, develop their international competencies. And we have a lot of minors in the field of international communication, intercultural communication. And we see that the students understand the value of that. We see that the percentage of students that choose that minors, that subjects, is increasing rapidly. So we put more and more attention to meet this demand from the student side. I think that's the experience of Financial University, and I would be happy with my colleagues to answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Liliya. So we have two questions, and I'm afraid we have only time for two questions. I will pose the first question and request you to answer the question in 2 minutes, please. That way we can handle both questions, and I will have a minute or two to attempt a summary, although I'm not sure I can do that, but I'll try. So if you can begin with Professor Fady Fadel, the question is, what role do you believe universities can play in promoting global citizenship and fostering intercultural dialogue? You are on mute, Fady.
The role that the universities would play in promoting these values is to offer, on one hand, programs in connection, with these values. It's not only about hard skills, it's about soft skills. And I do guess that my colleagues, they have already this component in their programs, and having faculty not only dedicated to have this technical knowledge, but also trained and bringing their experience and their knowledge and their soft skills to these programs. I think this is what would be appropriate in terms of promoting these values in our universities.
Thank you very much. Dr. Matherly?
And I'll just start with saying that in context to this, that what we see as the purpose of our international education agenda, our goals for global learning at Lehigh, specifically deal with that part of our role is to be having students understand their place in the world and that sense of responsibility to self and others. And our position statement, Dan, it deals with this. I'm going to add one other way of thinking, because I agree with what Fadel was saying about the soft skills and that kind of embedded idea of global competency and this. And it's an idea that I'm just sort of beginning to play with. In another context, I was asked to respond to some questions about impact of AI on internationalization and AI on universities. And what we know is where the threat seems to come into and the concerns in higher education are all the functions that can be replaced with AI. In some ways, the data analysis, problem set solving, those, even to some extent, the writing and its side. But one of the things that we know is not the place that can be replaced, deal with more of those kind of sets of uniquely human skills, of the empathy, the understanding of culture and difference, and that. And one of the things that I've been sort of thinking about in this context is that it speaks even more to the importance of where international global learning, global citizenship sits, that in a place where we know that certain skills have potential to be done elsewhere, and that this is one of the competencies that we need, that is unique to the human experience to this. And I think that it speaks then more to the role of, again, of where at a time where this idea of kind of global learning / global citizenship and intercultural understanding sits.
Thank you. Professor Angelia Wilson.
Just very quickly, two things. First of all, when I'm talking with my students, when I'm giving them feedback, I often say, okay, you have knowledge, but you don't have understanding. So they can repeat back to me certain things, but they don't necessarily understand it. And so I think that the internationalization bridges that gap and not only gives students knowledge about something or another culture, but they give them understanding, a deeper understanding of others, of that culture and that empathy. And the second thing that I would point out is, in our polarized world, this internationalization is incredibly important because it does bridge that space between us and other. And it is probably the one thing that we can teach, whether it's citizenship or valuing other cultures. Those things may or may not come, but the internationalization is the one thing that can bridge that polarized world between the us and the other and teach that level of understanding that we need.
Thank you. There is another question on precisely that point, but I'll come to it later. Ms. Liliya, on this first question.
Thank you very much. I believe that the role of university is provide the meaning of global citizenship. We should try to present to students its value, its perspective, its trends. And the second thing, I think it's important for the university to help to make first steps in this road, because sometimes the idea to explore the world seems very interesting, but also challenging. And not all the students know how to start this journey, and the role of university to help them to make first steps, to give them understanding, and to support, sometimes financially, sometimes psychologically, sometimes culturally, sometimes academically. So different students need different kind of support, and we need to provide different kind of support for the students to make the first step towards global citizenship.
Thank you. So there is tremendous interest from the audience. So I'm going to ask you what is known as a double header. So two questions, and they're not related to each other, obviously, but I think for saving time, I'll ask two questions, and if all of you can spend some time, 1 or 2 minutes answering. So one is an interesting question, mildly critical of all of us in a way. They're saying that here you guys are sitting and talking about intercultural competence and internationalization at home, while we see bigotry on the rise, hate speech on the rise. So what can universities do through internationalization at home to tackle this? That's the question number one. The question number two is interesting. Can international internships, especially now with remote internships, possible? So internships, remote internships, can they become a pivotal element of internationalization at home? So to recapitulate, the first question is on bigotry and hate speech and how internationalization at home can help. The second is remote internships, because that can also help the 95%, as I said, of students who don't have the means to travel. But those are the two questions. Fady, you have the first mover disadvantage, so may I turn to you?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Mohan. So let me start with the internships. Yes, it's possible to have international internships, and indeed for international students, when they are in France, anyway, it will be international. And it's possible to have either international internships through the portfolio or the identity of the company where they are doing the internship, even if it's in their home country, or through the mission that they are going to do. And yes, indeed, the remote internship is definitely very possible and well implemented in the programs. Now, regarding how universities face the hate speeches, etc., I think that when it comes to promote and to implement this international atmosphere, intercultural mindset and competence in our universities, it's very clear that students who don't like this international atmosphere, they will not feel comfortable. And it happened that we had few students coming from other European countries. They don't feel comfortable with this international atmosphere. So, you know, by themselves, they will say that, yeah, either the academic system, which is very American, or this environment is too much for us, so we cannot feel comfortable. But this doesn't mean that the university should question itself about what it's offering. So we should maintain our message that here is international hub where we will gather people to evolve and to earn the maturity more by more, and especially when they are accompanied and well coached by the faculty and the administration.
Thank you. Dr. Matherly?
Okay, well, I'm going to follow suit and deal with the easier question first, of internship. I actually am a big believer that there's a space for virtual internship. And I see that they do two different things. I think on one hand, I think sometimes it can create opportunities for students to engage in internships with places or projects that might otherwise be more difficult because of time, difference, cost, you know, all those things that we've talked about when we've done a virtual internship with some Kenyan partners that just has been very successful for all those reasons, and just more the complexity of actually making physical mobility happen. So it's been easier to do it virtual on that. But the other is that I think in some ways it also mimics what's really happening in the workplace. We've had a very successful set of internships we've done with startups, and so many startups already, and this is their mode of operation. So to have it be virtual isn't really anything different, and to some extent, it's actually part of the work skill that a student gets, because that's the way that sector works there. And so I think it can really expand opportunities. So big believer to that. To the second question, I think that it's the conundrum that we're dealing with, but it speaks even more for the importance of this particular work at a time. And I'm going to again speak from a U.S. perspective at a time when there is still a significant very much a kind of populism in the country, kind of a nationalism of questioning kind of an international engagement generally on things, that I think that that for many students when they come to university, it's their first opportunity to really deal in a very, very, very personal way with difference. And I think that how we then go about helping students learn to interact and be effective in that, and to work with people who are different than themselves, be it in our case domestic diversity, or with students from other places, other cultures, that because they're on our campus or we are dealing with them virtual. Just it's because of this kind of other pressures that makes that work so absolutely essential for what we do.
Thank you. Professor Angelia Wilson.
Again, I'll take the second one first. Yes, internships, virtual internships are not only possible, but our students are benefiting from those, getting research jobs with NGOs around the world, but they're able to stay at home and those sorts of things. And one of the groups that has been particularly, external stakeholders that have been particularly supportive of that have been our alumni. So I think that's a really good place to start when we're talking about the importance of internationalization and the importance of internships. On the second question, I think social science research tells us that when you have someone in your family who is different, when you have someone in your social circle who is different, it's much more likely that you will be understanding of difference. And so whether if somebody in your family marries somebody who is of a different race or a different sexuality or a different religion or whatever it may be, that it's much more likely that you think, oh, well, they're just my family. And then it causes you to question that space between us and other, because you can't kind of keep them out of the circle. And so social science research says knowing about other people helps us bridge that gap of polarization. And the last thing I'll say on that is to present a concept that I personally think every student should be taught. And it's a word that every student should be taught, and that is diaphobia. And it is the fear of learning from other people.
Can you repeat it? Can you repeat it, Professor Angelia Wilson?
Diaphobia. Diaphobia, the fear of learning something from someone else. And I think universities have to really resist the pressure that learning from the other, therefore somehow makes us, to use quotation marks, liberal. That in fact, it is our mission to overcome diaphobia, that we all need to learn a little bit more from each other.
Thank you. I found that most interesting. Thank you. Professor Liliya?
I'm also will start from the second question. Yeah, for us, the international internship also not only possible, but we implement several projects of international internship, especially during the lockdown period. We propose our students to make international online startups. So they create special international teams. They work in the online format, and they create special startup and then present to the companies, and the companies work as customers in this regard. And we see that in this experience, all parties were happy, the students, the company, and we understood that we have to continue that way. And now many students, they prefer to make virtual or remote internship. The Russian Federation is quite a big country, and many students come from different regions, and sometimes they prefer to come back after the university in their regions, and that's why they take internship in their home cities. But it's a long distance, and so we see that the remote format of internship is suitable for both for companies and for students. So we have some kind of win-win situation. Coming to the first question, I also absolutely agree that our mission, as Professor Wilson said, is to help students to learn from others, to learn from different cultures. Even when I come to students as a professor, I say then I remember myself being a student, and for us, all knowledge that we've got, we received from professors. So, and was professors giving knowledge to students. Now it's changing. I also learn from my students. Some of them start to work, some of them from different regions, from different cultures. And in the beginning, I usually say we will learn from each other. So I help them from my personal perspective to say that we all now learn. World is changing rapidly. World is full of diversity, different kind of diversity, and it's very important to understand each other and to learn from each other. And yeah, I think it works, and I believe it's indeed our mission to continue that way.
Thank you very much. I really want to thank all of you for participating in it so wholeheartedly and giving it all. I think a number of interesting points have been made. It'll take me another half an hour to summarize, so I won't do that. But I do believe I can make a couple of points with your permission. Number one, I think it is important to remember the 95–97% of the students. I sometimes think we focus so much on internationalization and student mobility and MOUs to be signed that we sometimes, miss the wood for the trees, as they say. So that's the first point. The second point is, both the curriculum and the faculty and the students are important, all three. And the way they interact with each other will what make internationalization at home successful. You need a good curriculum, You need diversity in the faculty. At JGU, we are particularly lucky. 46 countries represented in the faculty, more than 50% positions, leadership positions are women. So, and more than 50% of the students are girls. So I think those kind of things are extremely important. And I think the last point on hate speech and on bigotry, and I've learned a new word we've all learned a new word thanks to Professor Angelia Wilson, diaphobia. I'll go to ChatGPT-4 and check it out. But really, I think the important role that universities play cannot be overemphasized. Once again, thank you very much. And I really wish you a wonderful remaining part of the day wherever you are. Thank you.